joining me for Veg with Lisa Live. I'm Lisa. This will be painfully, obviously live. And today I'm going to show you how to eat more kale. And I'm actually going to tell you why the heck you want to eat more kale, just in case you think you don't like kale. But before we get started, type in the comments, say hello, let me know you're here, and let me know that you can see and you can hear me, whether you're watching live or with the recording. So, why in the world, hi Rob, thanks for watching. Why in the world do we want to eat more kale? Well, there are three reasons. And the first and foremost in my book, as always, is because it is amazingly delicious, especially, hello Susan, especially in the form of kale chips, okay? So number one, always first, it's absolutely delicious. Two, if you've ever tried to buy kale chips at the grocery store, they're ridiculously expensive. And they come in silly, all kinds of extra packaging, or they're crushed, so they're more like kale crumbs. The third reason to eat more kale, specifically in the form of kale chips, is because kale is absolutely ridiculously easy for me to say good for you. In fact, it's perhaps the world's most nutrient-dense food. We will talk more about that in a moment, but first of all, let me show you what I harvested from my garden just about 20 minutes ago. Isn't this amazing? So I'll turn you down here so you can see. You don't need to look at me. So kale is actually really easy to grow in your garden. You can plant the seeds, but I confess I get the starter plants because it produces quicker and more reliably. But look at this. I picked all of this just this morning. This has been a great year. But not to worry, if you don't have a place to plant a garden, or if you didn't plant any kale, you can buy all this gorgeous kale either at your local farmer's market, or if you don't have a farmer's market, you can buy it at the supermarket, yeah? And actually, this is gonna be really cool. I'm trying a little experiment with you all today. This is no, that's a broccoli leaf. I picked a broccoli leaf, and somewhere in here it is. This is a collard leaf. So I thought we could also make some broccoli chips and some collard chips. And don't worry about this. Yep, something was mentioned on there. It just shows that it was organic and I washed these. So that's all you need to know. We're gonna set those aside. One thing before I forget, everyone always asks me for the recipes for my recipes that I make on here, which I'm so happy to share. I actually just got a new batch of kale chip recipe cards printed. So if you want this recipe, what I'm going to show you today, in old-fashioned recipe card format, message me, private message me. Don't put it in the chats unless you want to get a whole bunch of junk mail. Private message me your mailing address and I'll stick one in the mail to you. Okay, so how do we make these aforementioned kale chips? Starts like this. Yep, and then what I do is, whether I pick it out of my garden or I bring it home from the supermarket, yeah, you can see that, can't you? I just strip the leaves. So you can leave the stems on, but preferably I take them out. They can be really tough, and it makes for a more pleasant kale eating experience. And then you rip them into bite-sized pieces. Now, what do you do with this? Well, you throw it in your compost. Here's our broccoli leaf, same thing. I'm just gonna pick those stems out and rip them into bite-sized pieces. Oh, here's another variety. Look, isn't this so cool? Kale comes in all these different shapes and colors. This is curly red kale. This is maybe a Siberian kale, different variety. For kale chips, I personally prefer these curly varieties because they have all these little nooks and crannies where the seasonings that we're gonna add can hide. And that way when we eat them, they jump out as a burst of flavor in our mouths. Okay, so you've got your kale, you've cleaned it, you've washed it, you've rinsed it, and then you've ripped it, destemmed it, ripped it, and put it into little bite-sized pieces. I love this. Let that SHIT go and eat more kale. Okay. What I like to do, I think one of the secrets, I think there are a couple secrets to getting these kale chips so that they're actually crispy. And I believe one of the things, the tricks, is to get them dry after you've washed them. So I take a clean dish towel, like that fun one that I showed you that one of my clients gave me as a fun gift. I put them in a clean tea towel and I just wash them off, or sorry, dry them off. Yep. As much water as you possibly can get out of them, the more likely they are to be really, really crispy for you. Then, I like doing things as a process because I don't always have big chunks of time, and maybe some of you are the same. So if I had the time, what I would do is I would get to this step, I would get this far, and then I would just let this sit out on the kitchen counter so that more of the moisture will evaporate. Yeah, if you had a ceiling fan in your kitchen, you could even lightly turn that on, and it will dry out some of the air so that it's nice and dry. Then, so you can see, actually, I'll show you what I did earlier. I did this with another batch. I washed them and I just rolled them up in that tea towel, let them sit to dry. That would be an intermediate step. And then this would be your final step. Patting them, patting them, patting them. Okay, then it's time to get down to business. So I got a cookie sheet. I lined this with foil just because this cookie sheet, I have no idea where it came from. I think it was Rob's, and I have some old grungy ones too that they're just disgusting. So I line them either with parchment paper or foil because they might be toxic and we don't want that in our food. Then you take your kale pieces that you've prepared. Let's see. Oh, let's make sure we do the broccoli leaf too. So you can see that. Give them a little pat, get it nice and dry. Okay, so let's talk about this world's most nutrient, perhaps the world's most nutrient dense food. What does that even mean? Well, I'll tell you. Kale has more than 200% of the recommended daily allowance of vitamin A, and that is in the form of beta carotene. It has almost 700% of your recommended daily allowance of vitamin K. What's vitamin K important for? Well, it's really important for blood clotting. Yeah, it is also good to prevent heart disease and osteoporosis. Now, if anyone is on a blood thinner, an anticoagulant for a prescription medication, vitamin K in the form of leafy greens, it already produces a naturally anticoagulant effect. So if you're on a blood thinner, it might intensify that and increase it. So you might be more susceptible to blood clotting. So just make sure you talk to your doctor before you go loading up on bunches of kale if you're on a blood thinner. Okay, check this out. This is super cool. So I've got my kale here spread on a cookie sheet. Look at this. So if you needed to go run off and answer an email, you can just leave this on the plate. Yes, Susan, it is good to eat kale and to grow kale. Then you drizzle it, not too much, with a little bit of, I use extra virgin olive oil. And then kind of like when we made our kale salad, if you missed that episode, you can scroll down my page. It was from a couple weeks ago. You don't really need to massage the kale, but just get in here, get down and dirty with it, and get the oil all over the kale pieces. Yep. Okay, and then you can just rub that on your hands. It's a natural moisturizer. Annie, good to see you. Okay, cheers, cheers. I got people tuning in from all over. I got a couple of people tuning in from Ponax. I thought it was a working lunch, whatever. Okay, so look at that, super cool. Now, here comes the fun part, the seasonings, I always do a little bit of sea salt, just a little bit. Now, I want to tell you a trick. First of all, if you have hypertension and you're watching your sodium levels, by all means, go easy on the salt. However, we got to tell, I tell the truth on here, only nothing but the truth. We get most of our excess sodium from processed foods and fast foods and places like Ponax, Annie, and Pussy. So we don't get it from our salt shaker, yeah? I encourage you to moderate your sodium levels, especially if you have hypertension and if your doctor's told you to. But again, it's coming from the processed food, so quit eating out and eat at home and blah, 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 right? Okay, so a little bit of sea salt, then a couple different flavor ideas. I think cumin is really good on these guys, so I'm gonna sprinkle half with a little bit of cumin, The other reason we have to go easy on the seasonings is because when the kale, we're gonna bake it, it shrivels up, it dehydrates. Hi, Angie. It dehydrates, and that intensifies the flavors. So if you put too much salt on, it's gonna taste really salty. If you put too much, I also like to put a little bit of cayenne. If you put too much cayenne, and yes, Emily, there is such a thing as too much cayenne pepper, it'll intensify the cayenne and you won't be able to eat it. Okay, so I put cumin on half, I put cayenne over the whole thing, I put sea salt over the whole thing. Another seasoning that I love to do, no worries, Angie, better late to veg than never. I love nutritional yeast. I'm gonna put nutritional yeast on the other half. And if you don't know what Nutri is, hey, maybe we'll do an episode on that. Then you can kind of spread it around if you want. You could turn them over if you want and add a little more seasonings, going easy on things like salt and cayenne. Oh my gosh, these are gonna be so good. Okay, in the oven these go. So I'm showing you how to do this with no special equipment needed. If you have fancy dehydrators or fancy ovens that do all kinds of cool stuff, awesome. But you don't need them. You don't need them. You got it. Episode on nutritional yeast coming up. So I'm popping these in the oven. And then, hold on, I'm coming right back. Woo! I wish you could have smelled these. Woo, woo, woo. Look at this. These are incredible. So I put these in the oven earlier, and you can see. Oh, another tip that I got from my friend Pam, who's a professional chef, like a real one, not a pretend one like me. She said, don't crowd the cookie sheet. Yeah, that's really important. You've got to allow plenty of space so you can see how much they shrivel up. Now, wow, where's my plate? Rob, what did you do with my white plate? Well, anyway, here it is. So this was a pan I made with nutritional yeast earlier. And this is a pan I made with cumin earlier. Why else do you want to eat these babies besides the fact that they're delicious and much more economical to make at home? Well, kale is also an excellent source of vitamin C. In fact, it has, say it with me, more vitamin C than an orange, 1 cup of raw kale. Also, kale is loaded, because it's a cruciferous veg, it's loaded with cancer-fighting substances like sulforaphane. It's also really, really high in beta carotene. What else? We already talked about vitamin A. Guess what? 1 cup of raw kale has 3 grams of protein. Ask me where I get my protein from my kale. How much fiber? 1 cup of raw kale has 2 grams of fiber. Remember, we have to eat plants to get fiber. We have to have fiber to be healthy. End of story. 0 fiber in animal products, 0 fiber in fats, okay? In like butter and oil. Here we go. Let's give these a taste. Oops, sorry, my camera's running away. Now, listen for it, people. Did you hear that crunch? Oh my God. Did you hear that crunch? These are amazing. They turned out so crunchy, so crispy. Kale is also high in some fancy things that are good for your eyes. 1 cup of raw kale has 33 calories for those of you who are still counting calories. Number 1 reason to eat more kale. It's delicious. Message me your snail mail address and I'll send you an old-fashioned kale chip recipe card. Thank you for joining me from wherever you are for Veg with Lisa Live. See you next week.